The crate beneath the ash, the sun hung low over the outer rings of Dustgrave, casting the scrapyard in a pale orange light. Jagged silhouettes of broken ships and collapsed orbital towers stretched across the horizon like the graveyard bones of a forgotten war. Wind howled through gaps in old freighter hulls, carrying the scent of ozone, oil, and rusted metal. This place had been picked clean 1,000 times by scavengers, traders, and thieves. But still it clung to secrets buried deep. Ray adjusted the strap on his shoulder and pushed his boot through the gravel, crunching across a patch of shattered glass and dented engine caps. He was lean, early 30s, dressed in patched cargo gear and layered jackets that had long since faded from their original colors. Dust clung to his skin. A magnetic scanner blinked steadily in his gloved hand, pinging weak signatures of buried tech. Useless, dead, still. Ray pressed deeper into the yard. He wasn't looking for riches, just a single power core, old, broken, even unstable, anything to keep his lights on, and the heater running through the cold cycle nights. He had no crew, no family, only the humming tools at his side and the sharp instincts of a man who'd lived to tour long by his own rules. He stepped over a crumpled hull fragment and stopped. A sound, faint, not metal, not wind, a whimper. Ray froze. Every muscle taut. He scanned the horizon. The scrapyard was supposed to be empty this time of day. City patrols rarely bothered with it, and few dared venture past the perimeter fence. But there it was again, a low, muffled growl laced with pain, like an animal, or something worse. Ray crept toward the source, weaving between charred struts and piles of discarded tech. The scanner pinged softly at first, then louder as he neared an old cargo module half buried in collapsed steel. The casing was charred black, with warning symbols in alien script scorched across its side. He crouched low. The module looked like it had been ripped from a ship, mid-flight, and dumped here without ceremony. A makeshift prison. Ray pressed his ear against the surface, breathing, weak, unsteady. He knelt and pushed aside a bent pipe, revealing a crack in the metal wall just wide enough to see through. Inside, curled in a tight ball beneath wires and scorch marks, was something he'd never expected. A girl, or something like one. Her skin shimmered with metallic scales, silver and blue like frost and starlight. Small horns curled from her forehead, almost delicate. Her white hair hung in tangled strands over her bruised face, and a long tail wrapped protectively around her body like a snake coiled in fear. She looked barely conscious. Her lips were cracked, her eyes half closed and glowing dimly with a golden hue that pulsed like a dying light. Ree's chest tightened. "Hey," he whispered, pressing his fingers to the metal. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes flickered open. She stared at him, confused, dazed but aware. "Water," she croaked, voice thin as air. Ray fumbled for his canteen and slipped it through a gap in the crate. She drank slowly, desperately, like someone who hadn't had a drop in days. Her hand shook as she held it, claws barely able to grip. When she finished, she let the canteen fall and slumped back, exhausted. He looked around. No drones, no patrols, no eyes. Whoever left her here hadn't meant to come back. Ray made his choice. With practiced speed, he pulled out his multi-purpose cutter and began slicing through the lock panel. Sparks flew. The crate groaned. He whispered soft reassurances to her. "Hang on, almost there." She didn't speak again, but her eyes never left his. The door fell open with a groan. Ray stepped inside and wrapped her carefully in his outer jacket. She was light to light. He lifted her into his arms, her head falling gently against his shoulder. Her tail twitched, then slowly curled around his wrist like it didn't want to let go. "I've got you," he whispered. Ray didn't take the main path back. He slipped through the scrapyard's forgotten vein service tunnels, collapsed cooling ducts, and beneath old hover rail lines. The sun had dipped below the skyline by the time he reached the rear entrance to his workshop, a squat steel shelter, nestled between broken silos on the colony's edge. He kicked open the door, and carried her inside. The lights flickered to life. The room was cluttered tools, wires, half-finished repairs, but it was warm, safe. Ray laid her on a padded bench and studied her in full light for the first time. She was young, maybe his age, in human years, maybe younger. Her feet were burned, and torn metal cuffs locked around her ankles. Scars ran across her arms, some old, some recent. Her scales shimmered faintly with each breath. She was beautiful and terrifying and unknown all at once. He grabbed his medical kit and started cleaning her wounds. The scanner beeped wildly as he passed it over her unreadable DNA. Internal heat too high. No registry match in any known database. "What are you?" he whispered. Her eyes cracked open again. "You're human," she said weakly. "Yeah," he said. "Name's Ray. I fix things." She blinked slowly. They called me Kari. Ray repeated it softly. Kari. Okay, you're safe now. Kari. Her eyes didn't close this time. They stayed on him until her body finally gave in to sleep. Night. Ray sat beside her. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Not with the hum of unknown tech in her body or the mystery of what she was still hanging in the air. She wasn't junk. She wasn't a malfunctioning droid or forgotten experiment. She was alive, and someone had tried to throw her away. He looked at her curled form, wrapped in his jacket, her breathing shallow but steady. I don't know what they did to you, he whispered, but I promise, you're not going back. Then, at 3 a.m., the fire alarm screamed at Ray bolted upright. Smoke poured from the workbench. Kari was awake, eyes glowing gold, body trembling. Sparks flew around her like fireflies. The metal beneath her feet glowed red-hot. Ray, she said softly, voice shaking. I had the burning dream again. And that's when Ray realized. She wasn't just alien, she was something far more dangerous and far more alive than anything he'd ever known. Fire in her blood, smoke still drifted in spirals above the workbench, the air laced with metal and scorched plastic. Ray stood frozen in the doorway, his mind racing to catch up with what he was seeing. Kari sat hunched on the edge of the bench, knees drawn to her chest, breathing heavily. The metal beneath her feet had melted, puddled like wax under a flame. Sparks jumped off scattered tools around her, some burnt out completely. Her eyes glowed brighter now, not softly gold like before, but white-hot with flickers of fire dancing behind her irises. I had the burning dream again, she whispered, voice shaking. Ray approached slowly, one hand stretched toward the emergency power kill switch. She didn't move to stop him. He cut the current, and the overhead lights flickered off, replaced by a dim backup glow. Now in the low light, he could see it better. Her skin shimmered with a faint red glow, like embers beneath a silver surface. Thin trails of steam curled. From her shoulders, her hands trembled as if they ached to hold something but not a weapon. Control. Kari, Ray said, voice calm. You're okay. You're not hurt. She shook her head. No, I'm not okay. I can feel it inside me. It's like there's something waking up. Something bigger than me. Ray looked at the melted tools beside her. They weren't cheap. Knockoffs. Those had been military-grade alloys. I've seen thermal bursts before, he said softly, but nothing like this. This isn't just heat. It's single quotes S. Directed like plasma. Controlled fire, not controlled, she muttered, holding her hands close to her chest. It just explodes. Ray glanced at his scanner and slowly walked back to his desk. He powered it up, fingers flying across the cracked touchscreen. Her vitals were off the charts. Core temperature fluctuating. Energy spikes coming in waves then vanishing like they'd never been there. DNA profile still unreadable. One line blinked in yellow. Subject class, unknown, biosignature anomaly. Draconic elemental fusion detected. Draconic, Ray repeated out loud. He'd heard the word only in myth stales of ancient creatures from early planetary exploration. Eras, supposedly extinct, mostly dismissed as exaggerated battlefield legends. Kari, he said, turning to her. Do you remember where you came from? A lab, a planet, anything? She hugged her knees tighter. I remember pain. I remember pain, then heat, then silence, then silence. I remember voices always behind glass. They never looked at me, only measured me. Then one day, they stopped coming. Ree's jaw tightened. Whoever created her had treated her like a tool, and when that tool became unpredictable, they threw it away like garbage. Your body, he said gently, is changing faster than anything I've ever seen. You need help, training, but more than that, you need time to grow into whatever you're becoming. She didn't answer, just stared at her hands as small flickers of flame rose and vanished along her fingers. I'm not supposed to be alive, she finally said. They told me I was a failed prototype. Ray crouched beside her. You're not a prototype, you're a person. She looked at him with uncertainty, eyes still glowing. Then why did they lock me in a box and dump me in a junkyard? Ray didn't answer because there was no good answer. Instead, he said, you're not there anymore, you're here. And I don't leave people behind. She didn't speak again, but she leaned slightly into him. It wasn't much, just enough. By morning, Kari was resting on a mat beside the furnace, wrapped in thermal blankets. Her body had cooled, her breath even, though her skin still pulsed faintly in the dark. Ray couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, running diagnostics, and scraping every shadow channel in the colony's network for anything related to her news about mysterious DNA, unregistered biological signatures, or lost military shipments. He found a thread, an old data leak tagged as Project Emberwing, purged from official records over a decade ago. No files, no footage, just a list of codenames. Most were marked terminated. Only one had a blinking status. 08KR, unconfirmed. His eyes widened. Kari. He leaned back in his chair, blood running cold. They hadn't just dumped her, they had erased her. The final piece of something vast and dangerous. Then came the sound. Whispers, not real voices soft. Static from the comms. Array. He checked the signal. A hidden surveillance drone had just pinged his outer perimeter. Someone was watching. Hours later, Kari woke to the scent of food and light rain on the roof. She sat up groggily, wings still folded tight along her back. Ray handed her a warm bowl of nutrient broth and a small set of clean clothes, old but soft. She touched the fabric as if it were something sacred. "Why do you keep helping me?" she asked as she ate. Ray sat beside her, wiping grime from his hands. "Because you're not trash, and I've fixed broken things my whole life, but you're not broken, you're changing." Kari looked down at her scales. "But they still called me dangerous." Ray nodded. "Maybe you are, but sometimes that's what the galaxy needs." She smiled faintly. Her eyes weren't glowing this time, but there was fire there anyway. That evening, they stood together outside the shop under the glow of twin moons. The junkyard stretched out behind them like a sea of bones. Kari looked up at the sky, her tail swaying slowly. "Do stars ever burn out?" she asked. Ray glanced at her. "They do, but some explode first, leave behind something brighter." "Maybe I'm like that," she said. "Something they tried to snuff out, but I'm still burning." Ray smiled, then let them feel the heat. But as the night deepened, beyond the colony's border, high above in silent orbit, a private stealth cruiser blinked into view. Its sensors locked onto a residual heat spike traced back to the scrapyard. Inside, a man in black tactical armor stared at a screen marked "Target Reacquired." 08KR, send the retrieval team. Full authorization. If the asset resists, terminate. Just like that, Kara's past was coming back. This time, she wouldn't be in a box. She'd be on fire. Hunted through flame and ash, the morning came slow and quiet, but Ray didn't trust it. He stood on the roof of his workshop, a dented pair of binoculars pressed to his eyes as he scanned the horizon. Clouds rolled across the sky like ash, thick and low, too low. They moved like something was pushing them. Below him, Kari sat cross-legged on the floor of the garage, her wings folded tight against her back. They were still small, half-grown and thin like fragile bone fans, but they shimmered faintly under the ceiling light. Sparks played across her fingertips as she practiced, palms open, flame flickering just above the skin without burning it. She was learning. Fast. "You're getting better," Ray called down. She didn't look up. "I can make it burn, but I can't make it stop when I'm scared." Ray climbed down the side ladder. "Then we'll just have to make sure you're not scared." Kari turned her head slightly, her silver blue hair brushing over her horns. "I think they're coming." Ray froze. "You feel them?" She nodded. "Like pressure in my chest. It's like the heat wants to rise again, but it's nervous." Ray checked the perimeter feed, nothing obvious. But his own instincts told him she was right. He went into his back room and opened a long crate. Inside, an old recon pack, a portable cloaking field generator, and a folding energy baton, outdated, but still functional. He'd never had to use them all at once, until today. He walked back out. "Pack light, we're not staying." Kari stood slowly. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere no scanners work. Out past the wall. There's a place near the old mining rigs." "Will I be safe there?" Ray didn't answer right away. He looked at her, at the faint glow building along the scales on her arms. "You won't be safe, but you'll be free. And maybe that's more important." They moved fast, slipping into the storm drain system beneath the scrapyard. The tunnel was cold and tight, barely wide enough for both of them to move side. Lights flickered above them, remnants of a system that had once served the city's water supply, now forgotten. "I don't like small spaces," Kari said softly. Ray glanced at her. "Because of the crate?" She nodded. "Everything was dark, cold, then hot, like they locked the sun inside me and forgot to put out the fire." Ree's jaw tightened. "They'll regret that." Behind them, the hatch to the workshop burst open. 3 figures stepped into the room, tall, armored, silent. Black plates covered their bodies, visors glowing red. Their weapons were sleek, with no markings. They didn't speak. They scanned. One knelt beside the workbench, still radiating heat from Kari's last training flare. "Confirmed trace," one said into a comm line. "They've gone underground." The leader tilted his head. "The girl's unstable, we retrieve her." "Human is expendable." They dropped into the tunnel one by one, boots echoing like thunder down the steel corridor. Ray and Kari reached the end of the first sector. A rusted maintenance hatch blocked their path. Ray dropped his pack and pulled out a fusion cutter. "Seconds," he said, voice tight. Kari turned back, eyes glowing softly. "They're close." Ray's hands moved faster. Sparks flew as he sliced the bolts. "Just breathe. Stay calm. If you burn, do it on purpose this time." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I don't want to hurt you." "Then don't hurt me. Hurt them." Suddenly, a clang echoed behind them, a voice low, distorted, filtered through armor rang out. "Asset 08KR, stand down." Kari took a step forward. "No." One of the armored hunters appeared in the tunnel. He raised his pulse rifle. But Kari was faster. With a scream that split the silence, her hands ignited. Fire exploded out from her body in a cone of white-hot plasma. The blast struck the tunnel wall and flared toward the soldier. His armor melted. In seconds, he didn't scream, he didn't have time. His rifle shorted, and his visor cracked before he hit the ground. Ree's jaw dropped. That wasn't flame, that was ... pure energy. Kari stood panting, her eyes wide in panic. "Didn't mean to, it just happened." "You meant it," Ray said, slamming open the hatch and pulling her through. "And that's okay." They emerged into the dust-blown outskirts of the colony, beyond the fence. In the distance, the old mining towers loomed like the bones of giants' black silhouettes against the amber sky. Ray pointed toward one. "There, we hole up, regroup, and figure out what to do next." As they ran, Kari whispered, "They won't stop." "Ray, I know," he replied, "but neither will we." Back in the tunnel, the remaining two hunters stood over the charred remains of their comrade. "She's further along than projected," one muttered. The leader activated a pulse beacon. "Send the Phase 2 team. Bring suppressors. We underestimated the flame." He stared down the tunnel. "Next time, we don't retrieve, we neutralize." The mining rig was hollowed out, rusted and unstable, but it still had power. Ray rigged a basic shield around the entrance and patched a battery into the old generator. They set up in the back chamber where fallen beams created a natural barricade. Kari sat on a pile of old cloth, knees drawn to her chest. Ray brought her a canteen. "You saved us back there." "I lost control again." "No," he said. "You used control. The only reason we're still breathing is because you decided to burn instead of break." She looked at him with those flickering eyes. "They'll bring more, I hope they do," Ray said. "Because next time we won't be running." Kari stared at the floor. Then slowly, she stood and stretched her wings. Not small anymore, not fragile. They shimmered with heat and power. Light pulsed from her spine as flame licked the tips of her wings like living threads. Ray blinked. "You're growing, I think," she said, her voice low but strong. "I'm becoming who I was meant to be." Then she looked toward the sky. "And they're going to wish they never tried to erase me." The wings of a weapon. A low growl of wind stirred the ash-blown air around the old mining rig. The metal walls creaked with age and warping heat, but they still stood strong, like relics of a time when machines built more than they destroyed. Kari stood just inside the rusted archway, her body still as stone, her new wings trembling faintly behind her. She hadn't spoken in an hour, not out of fear, but because something inside her was no longer breaking, it was building. Ray watched from behind a console, eyes flicking between his makeshift motion sensors and Kari herself. The last heat flare she released had cracked one of the inner steel beams and blackened the floor beneath her. Her power was climbing, not like a flame waiting for air, but like a storm learning how to control its lightning. He stepped forward. "Slowly, how do you feel?" "Lighter," Kari said without turning. "And heavier?" Ray tilted his head. "Both. I feel like I could fly and fall at the same time. Like I'm lifting into something new, but still dragging the weight of what they made me to be." Ray sat down on an old broken crate. "Then let's figure out which one you want to be." She finally turned toward him. Her eyes weren't just gold anymore, they were molten, like two suns trapped behind glass. Her scales were shifting again, expanding across her collarbones and down her arms, forming natural armor. Her wings, once thin and skeletal, now had full span and muscle. They were glowing faintly at the edges, edged in crimson light, like embers refusing to go out. Ray hesitated, then said, "We have to talk about what's coming." Kari nodded. "You felt it too." He nodded back. "They're escalating. The team that came after us was private paramilitary and marked gear. Dead comes. Advanced thermals. That's not a warning shot. That's retrieval and disposal." Kari looked out across the open desert beyond the mining rig. "I don't think they plan to retrieve anymore." "No," Ray agreed. "They're done calling you an asset." Now they see you as a liability, and they'll wipe out this whole region to keep you buried. Kari looked down at her claws, curling them slowly. Then maybe it's time we stop running. I was thinking the same thing, Ray said, but not with more fire. She raised an eyebrow. No fire. Ray smiled faintly. Not at first. With truth. He reached into his pack and pulled out a box the size of his hand. Its outer casing was dented, but the screen blinked to life. This is a relay beacon. Hidden tech from the old colonies. I salvaged it a decade ago. It taps into public broadcast bands across orbital and local comms. Kari stepped closer. What would we send? The truth, Ray said. About Project Emberwing, about you. I've been piecing it together, scattered logs, broken data chains. If I send out what we have, it'll reach hundreds of systems, maybe more. The Dominion buried this story, but the galaxy still loves a scandalous, especially when it proves the monsters weren't who they said they were. Kari stared at the box. But if we do that, they'll come with everything they've got, he finished. No more containment teams, no more cleanups, just annihilation. Kari sat beside him. You've had that beacon all this time. Didn't know what to do with it, until now. She took a deep breath, her wings folding around her slightly like a protective shell. What if they catch us before the signal finishes broadcasting? Then we make sure that when they do, the whole world's already watching. That night, Kari trained under the stars. She stood in the open canyon behind the rig, wings outstretched, trying to lift off. Ray stood nearby with a small pulse monitor and heat gauge, shouting numbers between her attempts. 3 seconds. That's your best yet. Kari landed hard, rolling once in the sand. It's not enough, she said, wiping sweat from her brow. If I can't fly properly, I can't fight in the air. Ray walked to her side. Hey, you're doing more than surviving now. You're building. I need to do more than build, Kari said. I need to burn what they made me into, and become what I choose. She stood again, her wings beat. Once ice then flared outward with a burst of heat so sudden the sand beneath her feet turned to glass. And she lifted. Not just hovered, flew. Ray stepped back as she rose 5, then 10 meters into the air. Her tail balanced her arms wide as flame danced from her shoulders. Then she dove spiraled through the canyon and pulled up into a loop that left a trail of shimmering heat in the sky. Ray grinned. Now that's a dragon. Kari landed beside him, breathing hard. I'm starting to remember pieces of what they taught me. How to balance wind, how to ignite from core heat. But this time, I'm not doing it for them. You're doing it for you, Ray said. She nodded. And for the ones they'll come after next. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Alpha Hunter was descending. A sleek black ship. Its hull covered in stealth plates and adaptive armor. It pulsed silently above the planet's atmosphere. Inside, a single figure stood before a circular command table. He was twice the height of a man with black scales, trimmed in gold and a face hidden behind a smooth helmet shaped like a dragon's skull. His voice was a rasp, like embers, scraping steel. She's adapting faster than projected, he said. The original protocol will not suffice. The synthetic beside him blinked. Orders. The Alpha Hunter turned. No sedatives. No capture. No redemption arc. The experiment ends tonight. Back on the ground, Ray and Kari worked through the night, modifying the old mining rig's antennas to amplify the beacon. Every system hummed. Every code string scrolled across the screen. We go live at sunrise, Ray said. Kari looked toward the horizon. Then we'll be ready. But neither of them saw the tiny black drone perched on the cliff above them, its lens glowing faintly red. It blinked once, and sent a single message to the ship above. Target confirmed. Heat levels critical. Emberwing is active. When the sky burned red, dawn arrived, not in light, but in fire. The first rays of sunlight were swallowed by the shriek of falling metal. The Alpha Hunter's ship descended like a star gone rogue. Flames wrapped around its hull as it tore through the upper atmosphere. It didn't hide its arrival. It didn't need to. This was no covert retrieval. It was an execution. Inside the old mining rig, the ground trembled. Ray jerked his head up from the relay beacon's console just as dust rained down from the ceiling. Here, Kari said quietly, her wings extended slightly, instinctively, like a shield wrapping around Ray. He met her gaze. How close? She closed her eyes, listening not with ears, but with the primal sense buried deep in her blood. Less than 5 clicks, high altitude, descent vector, and her face darkened. It's him, the one they called the Alpha Hunter. Ray didn't ask how she knew. He could see it in her body language, tense, rigid, but not from fear, from memory. Like a scar remembering the knife. The terminal beside them pinged. The relay beacon was active, its systems fully charged and ready to transmit. One press, Ray said, placing his hand over the ignition switch. One press and the truth reaches every outpost, every feed across the sector. Kari looked at it, and paints a target on everyone who listens. Ray gave a tired smile. Hope tends to do that. Suddenly, a sound split the sky outside. A roar, not organic, not mechanical, but something between the two. Like jet engines screaming in pain, the roof groaned above them. They're not landing, Kari said. They're dropping in. What? From orbit? No, she said. From rage. In the clearing outside, the sandstorm had settled just in time for the wind to shift. Then the clouds exploded. From the heart of a flaming rift in the sky, a figure plummeted like a meteor wrapped in armor. He landed hard, knees bent, fist slamming into the ground. A shockwave rippled outward, cracking earth, toppling rocks, and setting the nearby cliff face ablaze. The Alpha Hunter rose slowly. He was enormous, nearly 10 feet tall, his armor black, with veins of red pulsing like lava beneath its plates. His faceplate resembled a dragon's skull polished to a mirror sheen. Behind him, drones spilled from the cloud sleek, blade-shaped things that hovered in tight formations, scanning for thermal signatures. The hunter lifted one hand. I know you're watching Emberwing, he said aloud, voice booming across the desert. You have 3 seconds to kneel. Inside the rig, Kari stiffened. He wants a show. He won't get it, Ray said. But Kari shook her head. He will, just not the one he expects. Before Ray could stop her, she stepped outside. Her silhouette met the sunrise. The tips of her wings caught the light, making her appear like a fallen comet reborn. She didn't speak, she didn't threaten. She just walked until she stood in the center of the old landing platform. The Alpha Hunter tilted his head, so the stray chooses to face extinction with dignity. How noble. Kara's eyes narrowed. I choose to face you. That's not the same as dying. I made you, he said. Your bones remember my voice. Your blood burns with the code I forged. I gave you the sky. She spread her wings wide. Then you'll regret it, because now I know how to fly. In a flash, the hunter launched forward. His boosters ignited, sending him across the ground faster than a bullet. But Kari had already moved, flipping backward, igniting a jet stream from her wings, and rising into the air. The sky turned into a battlefield. He followed her into the clouds, and they collided mid-air with a thunderclap of heat and fury. Sparks rained down as claws met blades, wings tangled with energy, whips. Kari screamed, not in pain, but in defiance. Back in the rig, Ray opened the secondary channel on the beacon. He accessed the override. The moment Kari had stepped outside, he'd realized something. This wasn't just a fight. This was a signal. He tapped into the hunter's own broadcast frequency, the one he used to taunt and control his prey, and Ray hijacked it across the sector. Any station tuned to military command would now hear not orders, but Kara's voice. Out in the sky, Kari ducked under the hunter's strike, then dove down and slammed into him with both legs, sending him tumbling into the canyon wall. He crashed with a roar, but landed on his feet, grinning under his mask. Strong, he admitted, stronger than any of the others. I'm free, Kari snapped, and her claws ignited with raw plasma. She flew at him again, and this time, they locked in a dead heat of speed and power, slamming each other into boulders, scorching the air with sonic booms. Then Kari whispered something and it echoed across every ship, base, and outpost now. Tuned into the fight, they called me a weapon, but I was never their fire. I was their warning. The hunter roared and grabbed her mid-air, slamming her down, but she twisted, using his own momentum to drag him with her. They hit the sand in a blinding shockwave. Inside the rig, Ray watched the relay monitor. The numbers were spiking. Tens of thousands of listeners. Then hundreds of thousands. Alien networks pinged back with sync signals. Some rebroadcasted or the truth was spreading faster than the Dominion could stop it. Suddenly, one of the hunter's drones smashed through the wall of the rig. Ray ducked, grabbing a crowbar, and smashed it with every ounce of desperation he had. The drone fizzled, and died. Then the rig trembled again, this time from below. The hunter's backup wasn't airborne, it was underground. Ray backed away from the beacon console. No, no, no. The ground cracked. Hand from it emerged a new threat, a drilling walker, six-legged, rising with a whine of heavy hydraulics. On its back was a fusion lance aimed directly at the relay. No, Ray shouted. He ran to the override switch, but the machine powered its charge. And then, Kari dropped from the sky like vengeance. She crashed into the walker, claws tearing through armor, flame erupting from her throat. The machine exploded in a pillar of fire. Kari emerged from the smoke, stumbling, burned but alive. She limped to Ray collapsed beside him. Is it working? Ray nodded. They're listening. and above them, 1,000 ships were listening to. The Empire demands silence. The wreckage smoldered around them. Smoke curled up from shattered machines, blackening the early light. Kari lay slumped beside Ray, her wings tattered, her scales flickering weakly with exhausted bioluminescence. Ree's hands trembled as he pressed cloth against her wounded shoulder. "You're losing too much," he whispered, voice cracking. Kari chuckled softly. "That's funny. I was about to say the same about your world." He tried to smile, but the pressure in his chest made it impossible. He looked at the relay tower, still intact, still broadcasting. The signal continued pulsing out across the sector, the truth, raw and undeniable. The Empire hadn't expected resistance, they certainly hadn't expected hope, and now ships from old colonies, rogue traders, and rebel frequencies were flooding the channel with one question: is it true? Ray leaned over Kari, his voice firm. "They're asking if we're still standing." Kari blinked, groggy. Tell them the sky's not big enough to hide the truth." But then came the sound they had both feared. The Oblivion-class dreadnought, a low, bone-shaking rumble rose from beyond the dunes. The ground vibrated as if the planet itself were afraid. The clouds parted as a shadow stretched across the entire valley miles wide. A fortress in the sky. The Dominion had arrived, and they were not here to fight. They were here to erase. Aboard the dreadnought's command deck, Lord Vaska, High Executor of Sector 8, leaned over the tactical display. His long fingers, encased in black exo-rings, moved like blades over the hologram of the junkyard region. The transmission from the relay was still going strong, he sneered. "A junk-born human, and a defective hybrid. Shaking half a sector," he muttered. An officer bowed behind him. "The beacon's encryption is human-level Tier 4. Old code, messy but stubborn." Vaska's eyes narrowed. "Then burn the mess. Start with the desert. Wipe it flat. Glass it if needed." The officer hesitated. "But our trackers show heavy local support spikes. Civilians. Broadcasts coming from allied border colonies." Vaska turned slowly. "And they're watching, so killing the pair now might silence," Vaska hissed. "Do you think I care for their sympathy?" He looked at the screen, locking eyes with the zoomed footage of Ray dragging Kari behind debris. "I want them to see what happens when you whisper against the Dominion." He issued the order. The dreadnought's lower hull opened. Inside, a planetary cleansing warhead began charging, its glow the color of an artificial sun. Back in the rig, Ray stared upward, jaw clenched. The ship's shape was unmistakable. "That's a city killer." Kari, barely conscious, whispered, "They're going to erase this place, and everyone in it." Ree's thoughts raced. There was no way they could outrun it. The rig wouldn't survive the heat, much less the concussive blast radius. He looked at the relay. There was only one choice left. He could stop the broadcast, shut it down before they fired, and maybe they would spare nearby settlements. But if he stopped now, the message ended incomplete, then fear would return, and the lie would grow stronger. Kari gripped his arm. "Don't stop, even if they bury us under the stars. Don't let them silence the truth." Ray knelt, eyes burning. "All right," he said. "Then we make sure the truth echoes forever." He began rerouting the signal to auto-repeat across redundant nodes, activating old satellite caches and forgotten coms buoys that orbited long-abandoned planets. If they killed the relay tower, it wouldn't matter. The message would never stop. Suddenly, a thunderous clang rocked the structure. The Alpha Hunter was back. His armor was scorched, one arm limping, half his faceplate shattered, but his fury had only grown. He smashed through the rig's collapsed gate, dragging a jagged spear of broken drone metal behind him. "Enough," he growled. Ray stood in front of Kari, shaking but defiant. "It's over." The hunter's eyes glowed from within the cracks of his mask.
"No, can't."
"Now it begins." He hurled the spear, but it missed. Instead, it impaled the relay tower's base. Sparks flew, circuits fried. The signal began to falter. Ray ran to the panel, desperately typing, rerouting power, anything to keep the broadcast alive. No, come on, hold." The hunter strode forward. "You think one signal will change a galaxy?" Ray didn't answer. He didn't have to, because from behind the hunter came a sound he didn't expect. A roar, not from Kari. Not from the sky. From the junk. Metal shifted. Scrap piled high began to move. Broken machines clicked and clanked. Then something crawled up from the wreckage. The young ones, the other dragon hybrids, small, weak, discarded, in failed experiments, had been hiding beneath the junk, watching, waiting, and now they rose. Their eyes glowed with the same color as Kari's. The hunter turned just in time to see 5 of them leap toward him, wings flaring, claws bared, shrieking not with rage, but awakening. They weren't weapons. They were survivors. The hunter went down under a wave of flame and fury. He tried to fight, to crush them one by one, but there were too many, and for the first time he looked afraid not of their strength, but of their choice. They had chosen to protect one of their own. Kari dragged herself upright, leaning on a rusted beam. Her voice echoed across the rig. "You made monsters," she said. "But we made each other." Ray slammed the final command into the console. The relay activated a failsafe. The message duplicated. Every colony redrifting satellite, once human, came online. And the truth went viral. The story of the human who found a dragon girl in the junkyard and chose to save her. Above. The warhead aboard the dreadnought reached its final phase. Lord Vasca stood with fury on his face. Wipe them out now. But the targeting system glitched. Then another system. Suddenly, the dreadnought's navigation screens were overridden. A single message blinked in every language known to the Dominion. "You can't kill what's already free." A rogue AI-1 hidden deep in old human code had awakened, and it had chosen a side. The day the stars listened, the sky exploded, but not with fire. Above the junkyard, where once the dreadnought prepared to cleanse the land in silence, thousands of tiny lights flared into life like a second galaxy was being born. Satellite rusted, once dead, blinked awake. Their signal arrays spun, their long-lost protocols responding to the frequency Ray had just activated. The Dominion's warhead powered down mid-charge. A full shutdown override. Lord Vasca stared in stunned silence aboard the dreadnought's command bridge, watching every system on the screen fall one by one. Even his own crew backed away, fearful of what was happening. "This isn't possible," he breathed. But it was, because someone had dared to remember, and now the machines built by humans, forgotten, dismissed, had remembered themselves. On the ground, the young hybrids surrounded the fallen Alpha Hunter. His armor hissed, cracked, and finally gave in. He collapsed into the dust, breathing ragged. Ray didn't speak to him. He simply walked past, helping Kari to her feet again. "I told you," Kari whispered, her voice still weak but proud, hope stubborn. He looked at her. "And so, are you." All around them, the junkyard had changed. What was once a graveyard now shimmered with potential. Every twisted metal beam and scrap of old war tech had become a monument to survival. They weren't hiding anymore. The broadcast that truth was playing on screens across the galaxy. From slave mining camps in the Kirill Belt to rich pleasure domes orbiting Varna Prime, people were watching. They were seeing a human help a discarded hybrid girl. They were seeing choice. They were seeing mercy. And they were beginning to wonder, what if we've been lied to? In a Dominion military school on a gas giant, a young cadet, half-reptilian, barely old enough to hold a blaster, paused his training. He turned to his instructor and asked quietly, "If humans are extinct, then who's the man helping the dragon girl?" The instructor didn't answer. In a political hall on the core worlds, ambassadors and lords of the Empire screamed at one another across a glowing table. The system's entire narrative was collapsing. Propaganda networks crashed under the weight of truth. The senators barked orders, issued denials, but none of it mattered. Because across millions of homes and outposts, people weren't listening to the politicians. They were watching the message, and the message said, the Empire feared what it could not control. Back in the junkyard, Kari and Ray stood before a wall of old machinery. The hybrids were gathering. The youngest among them clung to Kari's side, unsure but trusting. Ray looked to the horizon. Smoke still curled. The dreadnought hadn't left there. "Quiet," Ray said. "That means they're planning something worse." Kari nodded. "Then we move first." Together, they climbed to the rig's upper level. Ray activated the last working communication link, connecting to the relay satellites now orbiting above. He opened a universal channel. And spoke to anyone listening. His voice wasn't booming, it wasn't perfect, but it was human. "You may not know my name. I'm just a man from a junk world. I don't have an army, I don't wear armor, I don't command fleets. But I do have this." He motioned to Kari and the others, a girl who was supposed to die, children thrown away like trash, and a story they tried to bury. Kari stepped beside him. "Once, I was told I was a weapon, that I had no soul, but a broken man in a broken land taught me otherwise." Ree's voice grew stronger. "The Empire is built on fear. They silence anyone who questions, but you don't have to kneel anymore." He held up the small, cracked signal device, the one he had carried since the first day. "Humans were supposed to be extinct. We weren't. We're still here. And so are you." Aboard the dreadnought, the command bridge lights flickered. Alarms triggered again, but this time it wasn't from human tech. It was from within. All across the ship. Crew members, aliens, hybrids, once enslaved, began to turn on their overseers. The uprising wasn't coordinated. It didn't need to be. Ree's voice had been enough. Vasca stood, shaking, watching as one of his guards removed their helmet and saluted not to him, but to the stars above. Then he turned his weapon on the Overlord, on hundreds of worlds. Something unthinkable was happening. The Empire was cracking from the inside. Truth, spoken once, whispered by a human and a dragon girl in a junkyard, had rippled like thunder across the void. Kari watched the screen as message after message poured in from rebel cells, liberated cities, even from deep within Dominion territory. We're awake. We stand with the junkyard. We saw your light. You are not alone. Tears welled in her eyes. Ray, exhausted, sat beside her. What now? He asked. She smiled faintly. Now we give them more to believe in. He looked up at the stars, now full of blinking satellites and hopeful signals. They'll come after us, he said. They already did, she replied, and we survived. Ray leaned against the rusted bulkhead, a soft smile touching his lips. Then let's go teach the galaxy how to build from junk. The beast that once hunted Kari now lay curled around the hybrid children, purring softly, had chosen a new purpose. Not to kill, but to protect. And above them all, a new constellation shone not from stars, but from satellites carrying the message. We do not kneel, we do not forget. We choose truth. And from the ashes of the Empire, something human, and something more than human, began to rise. The galaxy would never be the same again.